So there's something called nested versus flattened components in Framer that probably you've not heard of, or maybe you've heard of them, but in this video I want to show you how you can use them so that you could make sure your sites are always optimized. It's kind of something that is easy to miss because we might find ourselves building and building and building, not really becoming aware of the final outcome of our sites.
Yes, my name is Joe and this is Framer Dive. Let's get this started.
Let's start by discussing what are nested components. So nested components are basically components inside other components. Kind of sounds a little bit tricky, but you're essentially building reusable blocks, then assembling them into larger reusable blocks. Let me just give you a quick analogy. So let's imagine this block thing is your section and this is your page in Framer or your canvas, and then inside it you create this other frame and you want to turn it into a component, and you turn this blue thing into a component. So this blue thing is the first component, and then let's say you're designing this blue component and then you want to say you want to add a component inside the blue thing. What happens is that you have something inside the blue component, so you have another component, and then you might say let me also add another component inside this green component, and you have this orange component. So this is a classical example of nested components, and it's normally good, but sometimes it might not work as you wanted it to work. So we're gonna weigh the difference. But let's now continue with what are flattened components. So flattened components is also a component, but is more simplified. It has simple structures where components are not deeply nested. So what do I mean by this? So imagine again you have this section in your Framer canvas, and then you want to add a component and you add this blue component. And then inside this component is just a single component, meaning that there is no more components inside it. This is an example of of flattened components, meaning that it is just a single component with everything that you need to use. Let's now let's do a quick comparison of what we have. If we look at the structure, and that is what we have just discussed, is that we have seen that a nested one has many small components deep inside it. And then we have seen the flattened one, all the elements are contained in one component. This is just a difference in how they appear in structure. And then we can also look at the reusability. You find that a nested component is highly modular. What this means is that it's highly reusable. And you'll see that a flattened one is less modular, which is more contextual. So if we go back to our previous page, let's just go back. If you look at this orange one is a component by itself, meaning that you can always reuse it in a different page or in a different section. But you find that if something is flattened like this one, it means that you won't have to reuse it. You have to tweak it on a more individual basis, meaning it's actually less modular. And then let's talk about the performance. You find that two components that are actually nested have a slightly heavier, especially in Framer, and this can be determined the speed of how fast your site loads. And also you can see that the flattened one is more lighter and actually faster in rendering. So these are two things that you need to weigh. Make sure if you don't really need nested components, always go for the flattened one because it's better to have something that is faster and quick. I'm also gonna give you an example in Framer so that you can have a better understanding of what we have just discussed. So we're going to build this nice car selector section that switches between different variants when we hover, and inside it we are gonna see the difference between nested components and flattened components, and we're also gonna assess the outcome. Is our slide faster, slower, how good it is to use them? I have this site which I've already created, and it's actually built in Framer. And before we go to the backend, I want to show you how it looks like. So notice I have my Lamborghini Huracan on this first page. So, and then when I hover on the Ferrari V88, you can see it switches to the Ferrari on the right image. And then again, we can see the Porsche 911 also changes. And then we can see the Chevrolet Corvette is also changing. But notice there's a slight delay between different hover states. But essentially, what you see here is some of these components are actually flattened and some of them are nested. And so let me just show you. Let's just go to the backend so you can clearly understand what we mean. This car selection is an example of what we call a component. So remember the blue one that we had, and then remember the blue box that we had. This is an example of one of the blue boxes, and of course this desktop is the black canvas that we had discussed before. What you're gonna see here is when I right click this, you can see that this blue card has a couple of elements inside them. So we have this first element, which is a test. We have this other one, test, which I've just named it test. Let me just name it test 2. And then we have this test 3. Essentially, these are layers. Inside them, they have this indicator, which I've just said, this is my image, and there's a frame and an image and the text. So if we go back to our definition of what is a nested and a flattened, we're going to see that a flattened has only one component. So this is an example of a flattened component. So this variant 1 is a component, but it is flattened in respect to this first element. But if we go to these other elements, notice we have this text container, this other one, this bottom 3 elements. Let me just show you. These bottom 3 elements here are actually not flattened, meaning they're nested. What we're gonna see is when I right click this, we enter into another component section. So what this means is that we have this text container nested inside of this car selection component. So that is an example of a nested component. And sometimes you might find that not only have we nested once, we can also nest twice. So I can take this image and create a component out of it. So maybe I hold Control Alt K, which is a shortcut for creating a component. And I'm gonna call this my image. And I'm gonna create a component. And what we have then is we have this component. Now it's an image inside this text container. So now we have kind of a 2 nested components, and we can do this as many times as we want. We can also add another frame here. Maybe I add this frame, then I turn it into a component. Again, let's call it frame. And then we have this component, and then we can do again. We can do as many times as we want, but I hope you get what I mean. You're gonna see that this Lamborghini Huracan, we've seen is just flattened component, but when I hover inside here, notice we are moving into another layer. And then again, this is also another layer. But then when I come here, you'll notice that it's slightly slower. Notice that it is taking its sweet time to render. This is because we are having what we call nested components. So nested components can slow your site down, especially if you don't really need them. So in this scenario, I think it's best for us to use flattened components because as you can see, it's much faster, more smoother, and it renders very quickly, unlike using these nested components, which take a bit of time to just, show up on our screen. And I'm gonna be pasting this remix file in the description so you can check it for free and try and tweak it yourself, try and play along with it so that you can have a good understanding of nested and flattened components. And again, always remember to weigh your options in case you don't really need nested components. Like in our case here, we're gonna stick to this flattened component. And in case you really need nested components, then you can continue and proceed with this. So in case we want to have a more granular look or a more a modular approach, we can always use this text container. But in our case, I believe this will work, and it will actually boost the speed of our site and even make it more simpler to build. I think that's it for today. And I hope you learned something small or something good that you can always use it into your project. Thank you for watching till this end, and I will see you again in the next video.